My mum wasn't keen at all on she didn't like the way I sung either. She hated the falsetto bit. I don't know about the last bit.
Jeff Lynne is not the kind of name that graces magazine covers every month, nor is he a familiar face to television audiences. But the moment a chord from Mr. Blue Sky rings out, the whole world instantly knows they're hearing his music. A sound not born from a stage, but from a galaxy. As the silent leader of Electric Light Orchestra, the man who reimagined the Beatles' dream with electronic orchestration and daring multi-layered arrangements, Jeff Lynne has written his own chapter in the history of modern pop music. He never needed the spotlight to be noticed, never needed scandal to survive, and never needed to shout to make the world listen. He worked with George Harrison, Tom Petty, Roy Orbison, not because he was famous, but because they trusted him. He was chosen to complete the final Beatles recordings, not because he begged for it, but because he was the only one who could. And after it all, he stepped back into the background, where he always belonged. Born in a poor working-class neighborhood in Birmingham, raised in quietness and without recognition, Jeff Lynne didn't just live to make music. He made music to live. And perhaps because of that, he created a kind of music that outlives any spotlight. But what shaped a man like Jeff Lynne? A studio genius who always rejected the stage? A producer who could make the galaxy sing with strings and vocoder? This is not just the story of a man who loved music. This is the story of a creative journey that never needed noise, but was powerful enough to change the sound of the world. Early life. Jeff Lynne was born on December 30th, 1947 in Shard End, a dreary industrial suburb of Birmingham, England. It wasn't the kind of place where big dreams were born. There were no stages, no studios, only fog, the grinding hum of steel factories, and people who spent their lives paying debts, building homes, raising children, then quietly disappearing. The Lynne family lived in a small brick house. His father, Philip Lynne, was a strict, reserved laborer who loved classical music but never saw music as a viable career. His mother, Nancy, was the opposite, gentle, warm, and the first person to let Jeff hear rock and roll through an old radio. But even with that encouragement, in an environment where music was considered useless, the dream of becoming an artist seemed like a distant luxury. Jeff was an introverted child. At school, he wasn't good at sports, never stood out, and was often teased by classmates. He disliked crowds and wasn't good at socializing. The only thing that truly fascinated him was sound, how a melody resonated, how instruments intertwined, how vocals blended with strings like magic. When he was 10, his father brought home a monotape recorder, a simple device with a single microphone and a spool of magnetic tape. But to Jeff, it was a gateway to an entirely different world. He began recording his own voice, experimenting with guitar, placing the mic in front of the radio and listening back. From then on, he became obsessed with sound, with controlling how music was heard, and became a producer in his own tiny bedroom. Still, no one took that strange hobby seriously. His father called it a waste of time and mocked his efforts. Jeff was never praised, never encouraged. He had only one weapon: silent persistence. His first guitar was an old acoustic, bought on an installment plan, £2 a week. No teacher, no guidebooks. He learned by listening and guessing. He slowly figured out chords, plucked notes, and over time, he not only learned to play, but also began to compose. When he first heard the Beatles on the radio, Jeff wasn't just in awe. He recognized something of himself in their music. The innovation, the complexity disguised as simplicity, the freedom of sound, everything he longed for was there. And so he made a silent vow. One day, he would create music like that, or even more. Jeff Lynne's childhood wasn't marked by dramatic shocks, crushing poverty, or profound loss. But it was a long stretch of being overlooked, misunderstood, and sidelined. Long enough for a quiet boy to start building his own world through music. A world where he could be heard, for the first time, even if only by himself. That boy never needed anyone to say his name. He just needed to create a sound the world had never heard before. Early career. When Jeff Lynne entered his early 20s, the musical dream of the shy boy in his bedroom began to take real shape. Late 1960s, Birmingham was fertile ground for rock and roll. Bands sprang up in every bar, every garage, and Jeff soon joined one of them, the Night Riders, later renamed the Idol Race. It wasn't a breakthrough, but it was the first real step into the professional world. Jeff didn't just play guitar, he wrote songs, arranged them, produced them, and quickly became the group's musical leader. The Idol Race delivered refined tracks full of baroque pop sensibilities, clearly reflecting influences from the Beatles and the psychedelic music of that era. But despite critical praise, the band couldn't break out from under the shadow of bigger names, eventually fading in a fiercely competitive music market. What set Jeff apart at that time wasn't his technical ability, it was his ambition. He didn't just want to write catchy songs, he wanted to create an entire sonic world, something no local band had dared to imagine. And that bold vision caught the attention of a fellow Birmingham maverick, Roy Wood, the frontman of the successful band, The Move. In 1970, Roy Wood invited Jeff to join The Move, a significant step up from the Idol Race. But their real focus wasn't keeping The Move alive. They were quietly building something bolder, crazier, and far beyond anything rock and roll had attempted, fusing orchestral music with modern rock. They called it Electric Light Orchestra. To Jeff, it was the escape from every limitation he'd ever felt in popular music. An opportunity to bring all the layered sounds he'd once stacked on childhood tape recorders into life-size reality. The first ELO tracks were a strange cocktail of cello, violin, Moog synths, electric guitar, and dreamy vocals, chaotic but promising. Their debut album, The Electric Light Orchestra, 1971, released in the US as No Answer, wasn't a commercial smash, but it marked the arrival of a sound the world had never heard before. In it, the track 10,538 Overture, written and sung by Jeff, painted the first picture of ELO's style, epic, electronic, and unlike anything on the radio. Then, something no one expected happened. Roy Wood left the band. Just after the first album, Roy, the very man who had initiated ELO, walked away to form his new band, Wizard, leaving Jeff alone at the helm of a ship that hadn't even settled on a direction. Many believed ELO would dissolve immediately, but Jeff Lynne didn't. That was the moment he stepped out of the supporting role and became the true creative leader. He didn't quit. He didn't alter the vision. He simply changed how to bring it to life. And from that moment forward, Electric Light Orchestra became Jeff Lynne's ELO, a sonic dream, quietly but relentlessly driven by one man. What happened next would make the whole world listen. Career breakthrough. When Roy Wood left after Electric Light Orchestra's debut album, many believed the band would dissolve. The project, with its cellos wandering through rock and violins fused into electric riffs, seemed too eccentric to survive without its founder. But Jeff Lynne didn't flinch. He didn't speak, didn't blame, didn't explain. He simply continued, quietly and steadily, as if he had always been preparing for the moment he'd steer the musical ship of his childhood dreams alone. What Jeff carried forward wasn't a traditional band, but a grand idea. Music could be as vast as a galaxy, as rich as a symphony, yet as intimate as a sweet ballad on FM radio. And he began to make that idea real, one arrangement, one layer of sound, one album at a time. ELO soon developed its signature style. Electric guitars no longer stood alone, but flowed into cellos, violins, and long, orbiting synth lines. Jeff, with the instincts of a born producer, crafted songs not just to be heard, but to feel as though you were floating in another world. The fusion was disorienting at first, but soon listeners realized this was a new musical language, where rock wasn't just rebellion, but imagination, cinema, and the cosmos. It didn't take long for ELO to become a phenomenon. Jeff's compositions and productions, from melancholic love stories to surreal soundscapes, started dominating airwaves in both the UK and US. He wasn't just writing songs, he was building a branded sonic universe. While the world drifted into raw punk or groovy disco, ELO chose a different path. Lush, meticulous, ambitious, sometimes like stepping into a science fiction dream. In 1977, Lynne released Out of the Blue, a double album written almost entirely in a matter of weeks, during a self-imposed isolation in a small Swiss cabin amidst a bitter winter. It wasn't just a successful album, it was a declaration of an artist at the height of his creativity. Mr. Blue Sky, which opened side B, quickly became a timeless track, echoing through blockbuster films, stadiums, and radio stations for decades after. And when that song plays, you don't need to know who Lynne is. You only need to know the world suddenly feels brighter for those few short minutes. Success brought pressure. ELO's tours became colossal, stages built like spacecrafts, dazzling light shows, and a battalion of musicians serving Jeff's sonic dream. But the further he went, the more he felt detached from himself. In a world where everyone sought to stand out, Jeff began to crave disappearance. He hated touring, hated interviews, hated being the center of attention, because the only thing he truly loved was sitting alone in the studio, headphones on, layering dozens of tracks. That was where he belonged. By the early 1980s, Jeff began adjusting ELO's sound to match the times. He shifted from orchestral arrangements to synth pop, scaled down the harmonies, made everything sleeker. The album Time was still a success, but the glow had changed. Not the brilliance of discovery, but the glow of something drifting past a space station. Though the songs still charted and radio still played ELO daily, Jeff felt hollow. Something inside him, perhaps curiosity, perhaps that first love, had fractured. In 1986, after the album Balance of Power, Jeff stepped away. No breakup announcement, no tears, just a long silence. ELO, the musical empire he had built almost single-handedly, now quietly floated into the orbit of memory. But Lynne did not vanish. He didn't leave music. He simply left the spotlight. Because behind it, in the dark solitude of the studio, a brighter new chapter was waiting to be written, one where he no longer stood on stage, but stood behind legends. The producer's journey. When Electric Light Orchestra fell into silence after 1986, many assumed Lynne had closed a chapter of his life. But no one expected that within that quiet, he would begin another kind of conquest. This time, not with a band bearing his name, but by standing behind the greatest names in music history. The first door didn't open by chance. It was George Harrison, the very man Jeff had idolized as a teenager, who became his close collaborator. They met in 1987, when George was planning a solo comeback, but felt his music was missing a little magic. Jeff, with his keen ear, flawless production skills, and uncanny artistic intuition, brought that magic into Cloud 9. The album became a hit, not only returning George to the charts, but astonishing both critics and fans alike. Classic music could still thrive in the MTV era. From that project, something unexpected happened. George Harrison, Roy Orbison, Tom Petty, and Bob Dylan, four giants of classic rock, joined Lynne to form a supergroup with a cheeky name, the Traveling Wilburys. In that band, Jeff was the youngest, the least famous, and the only one not already a celebrated vocalist. Yet he was the glue that held it all together, a quiet conductor, never needing to command but effortlessly guiding the group's harmony. The Traveling Wilburys weren't just a celebrity collaboration, they were a liberation, a statement that music could be nostalgic and modern, melancholic and humorous. Jeff produced everything, played nearly all the backing instruments, arranged the entire album, yet allowed each member to shine. When Roy Orbison died unexpectedly, it was Jeff who completed his unfinished recordings, not for profit, but to preserve a friend's legacy. After the Wilburys, more doors opened. Tom Petty invited Jeff to produce his solo album, Full Moon Fever, home to the immortal Free Fallin'. Paul McCartney brought Jeff in to produce Flaming Pie. Bryan Adams, Joe Walsh, even Regina Spektor in later years, all knew that if you wanted a sound both timeless and classic, Jeff was the one to call. But no project stunned the world like the one in which Jeff was entrusted to complete unreleased recordings by the Beatles. In 1994, Yoko Ono handed over 2 raw home demos recorded by John Lennon, Free as a Bird, and Real Love, with the hope that the remaining 3 members could finish and release them as a final gift to fans. And the one person they trusted to produce that sacred task was Jeff Lynne. It wasn't just a technical challenge, it required deep reverence for a legend. Jeff worked like a steward of legacy, preserving John's voice, enhancing it with delicate harmonies, and weaving in Paul, George, and Ringo as if no time had passed. When Free as a Bird was released, it wasn't a product of engineering, it was a miracle, and Jeff was the man who made it happen. There's a certain irony. Only after stepping out of the spotlight did Jeff Lynne reach his widest influence. He was no longer the soul of a single band. He became the keeper of many musicians' souls. He no longer needed to be heard for his name, but for the music he shaped, which always made others sound better. In an industry full of ego and noise, Jeff chose the quietest role, yet left behind echoes that never faded. No one emerged from his studio unchanged, because Jeff didn't just tune sound, he tuned the heart of music from behind a nameless door. Personal life. Jeff Lynne has never been one for the public eye. Throughout more than 5 decades in music, he has rarely given interviews, has no social media presence, and has consistently steered clear of media noise. Despite working with some of the greatest legends in the world, he has upheld one unshakable principle: let the music speak and let the man step back. Jeff has been through 2 marriages, both of which ended quietly. His first wife was Rosemary Adams, his second, Sandy Capelson, the mother of his daughter, Laura. Yet Jeff has never spoken much about his family. Those who've worked with him describe him as private, reserved, sometimes distant, but obsessively professional. In the studio, Jeff controls nearly everything, from drum patterns and backing vocals to the volume of each instrument. Some call it extreme perfectionism. For Jeff, it's simply the bare minimum standard. Behind that perfectionism lies an inner fracture that's hard to name: a complicated relationship with his father, Philip Lynne. Though a classical music lover, Philip never supported his son's musical ambitions. Jeff grew up feeling dismissed, doubted, constantly pressured to give up his passion. Even when ELO reached its peak, he never received a single word of praise from his father. It wasn't until after Philip passed away that Jeff discovered he had quietly kept every tape, article, and magazine about his son. A silent acknowledgement, but one that came too late. Perhaps that's why Jeff Lynne chose a quiet life. Not because he despises crowds, but because he has nothing left to prove. Behind his calm exterior is a soul once wounded, once hungry for recognition, that ultimately chose to heal through the very music he spent his life protecting. Legacy and influence. In the history of popular music, few have left as profound a mark as Jeff Lynne, without ever needing to dominate a stage. He didn't just succeed with Electric Light Orchestra, a band that sold over 50 million albums worldwide, but helped shape an entire musical genre often referred to as symphonic pop rock. Grand, layered, and emotionally resonant for the masses. The fusion of classical orchestration with electronic instruments was once seen as bizarre, but Jeff turned it into a signature, not through bold declarations, but through his work. He proved that rock didn't need to scream to have power, didn't need to be simple to feel close. ELO was living proof that a song could feature cello, violin, and vocoder, and still climb the Billboard charts if crafted the right way. Beyond being an artist, Jeff left an even greater legacy as a producer. George Harrison, Roy Orbison, Tom Petty, Bob Dylan, Bryan Adams, Paul McCartney, they all worked with him and recognized his irreplaceable genius. Most notably, his selection to complete the Beatles' posthumous recordings was a symbolic moment. Not just anyone is trusted to touch such sacred ground. But Jeff did, and he did it with absolute reverence. Jeff Lynne's influence extends to the generations that followed. Artists and bands like The Flaming Lips, Muse, Daft Punk, Beck, and even Taylor Swift have cited ELO's music as a source of inspiration. Filmmakers have also turned to his songs to evoke emotion, from Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind to Guardians of the Galaxy and in global advertising campaigns. In 2017, Jeff Lynne and ELO were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. In a brief speech, he simply said he was very grateful. No boasting, no fanfare, no nostalgic retelling of past glory. Just like the way he lives, quietly but indelibly. That same year, he was appointed OBE by the British royal family for his contributions to music. A high honor for someone the UK once overlooked, until the whole world began singing Mr. Blue Sky like a hymn of its time. Perhaps Jeff Lynne's greatest legacy isn't the number of hits or awards, but the feeling that whenever his music plays, the world seems a little wider, a little more beautiful, and a little more bittersweet. Not because he tried to create that, but because he spent his entire life listening and turned what he heard into sound the rest of humanity could feel. Life today. After decades spent behind the spotlight, Jeff Lynne returned to the public eye with a surprising decision. He would go on tour one last time. In 2024, at the age of 76, Jeff launched the Over and Out Tour, a graceful farewell, without fanfare but full of emotion. Starting in Palm Desert, California, the tour quickly swept across North America, drawing tens of thousands of fans each night, not to witness a fading star, but to relive the sound of their youth. What was striking was how Jeff's music hadn't aged. On stage, songs like Evil Woman, Telephone Line, and Mr. Blue Sky rang out as if they had never left this world. Without the need for flashy effects, just the signature guitar tone and a voice unchanged after more than 4 decades, audiences across generations sang along as if time had folded back to let them live it all again. In 2025, Jeff brought the tour to Europe and the UK, the homeland where all his dreams first began. The concert at Hyde Park, London, was expected to be a triumphant finale. But just days before, a shock struck. The July 10th show in Manchester was abruptly canceled right before curtain time due to Jeff's sudden illness. Fans were stunned. He had never missed a show in his entire career. He had once even performed with a broken arm, which made it clear, when Jeff finally stopped, it meant his health had reached a limit beyond willpower. Still, Jeff quickly reassured fans. He wasn't retiring. The Over and Out Tour was a goodbye to touring, not to music. In a year-end interview in 2024, he shared that he would return to the studio, the place where he always felt most complete. No more schedules, no more stages, but new songs, new lush arrangements in Lynne's unmistakable style, and new projects only he could imagine. Today, Jeff lives in Los Angeles, quietly, simply, still working in his private studio. He doesn't use social media, doesn't make public statements, and doesn't chase trends. Yet his music continues to echo everywhere, in films, in TV shows, in the everyday lives of a new generation. And he knows that. He doesn't need to be visible. Jeff Lynne remains part of the collective memory. At 77, Jeff hasn't said goodbye. He's simply taken a step back and quietly flipped on the studio switch. He may no longer stand before tens of thousands, but somewhere, millions are still listening and instantly recognize This is Jeff Lynne. It could only be him. Jeff Lynne was never one to make noise. He didn't chase fame, didn't seek the spotlight, didn't deliver thunderous speeches. All his life, he focused on one thing and did it to its fullest, writing melodies that people would still be humming long after he was gone. From an introverted boy in a small room in Birmingham to the leader of ELO and later the producer trusted by the Beatles, Jeff never strayed from music. But he also never let music become a tool for self-promotion. He lived behind the legends, and in doing so, became one himself without needing anyone to say his name aloud. In a world where ego often outshines the work, Jeff Lynne reminds us that consistency, humility, and wholehearted creativity can resonate louder than any grand introduction. He didn't need to stand on a pedestal. Just a few chords, a layer of strings, a passing melody were enough for the music to speak on his behalf. And perhaps that is the most beautiful legacy an artist can leave behind. Have you ever heard a song written by Jeff Lynne without knowing it was his? Or has there ever been a moment in your life when ELO's music unexpectedly reached you? Share that experience in the comments, because sometimes the quietest things connect us more deeply than any words ever could. If you believe this story deserves to be shared, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next musical journey. Thank you for staying until the very end. And remember, a good melody, even if written half a century ago, is always present when we listen with our hearts.